Thank you very much for joining us today. We are going to talk today at our workshop about the TPI changing regulatory landscape. And so what I'd like to do is I'll go on to the deck. Oh, thank you very much. So here's the deck. And what I'd like to do, first of all, is just introduce myself. So I'm Michelle Simpson. I'm Head of New Product Development at Electrolink. And joining me today is Christopher Wildgust, who is our sales manager, one of my colleagues in the data team.
Good afternoon.
So what I'd like to do today is really talk to you a little bit about the regulatory landscape and the changing landscape, and also to talk to you about the, give you an opportunity at the end to talk, ask any questions that you've got, provide any comments, etc. So we've got 45 minutes a day, so hopefully it'll be succinct and we'll get through it in that time. So first of all, I'll just go through the agenda, what we're going to talk about, a little bit about Electrolink in case you don't know who we are, talk about the voluntary code of practice for non-domestic TPIs, talk about an approach for getting ready for readiness during the voluntary stage, next steps, and then how Electrolink can help in the process. And then, as I said, time for Q&As at the end. So we'll move on to Electrolink and tell you a little bit about that. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of this, quite a lot of information on here. But first of all, just to say that we, as a company, are wholly owned by the electricity distribution network operators. We were formed in 1998 to act as a data trust, to facilitate the transfer of electricity settlement data using a system that was developed and is known today as the data transfer system. It's been continually enhanced and updated throughout this time. And we've added in numerous different flows and connectors, etc. Flows such as the RGMA metadata flow, which is quite a while ago now, down in 2004. Also very key to Electrolink's background, and today actually, is that we were appointed code administrator for a significant number of codes during this time, and we still manage the DACUSA code on behalf of that board. I'm also leading the digitalisation of that code, and we're moving into sort of phase 3 now, so that's significantly moved on. We were granted permission. One of the key things is to actually be able to retain and analyse that data. And so that was in 2012, and we've subsequently gone on to offer a significant number of APIs linked to that data. And also, following lots of conversations with Ofgem, DESNZ, etc., and their requirements, we have developed a new analytics platform. That was actually in 2020. That's now available for wider commercial use. I'm just going to move on now to the next slide. Oh, I've done, right? Okay, just to say a little bit about what we actually do. So from a data integration perspective, I've mentioned we've got the data transfer service. In order to accommodate central switching, we developed a new connection adapter. We've just developed a new market-wide half-hourly settlement adapter and are actively involved in the first round of SIT testing for that. And also this year we'll be launching the DCC Connect adapter, which facilitates smart data transfer. With regards to the analytics platform, as I said, we have developed Empress. A significant amount of data has been uploaded to that platform, and that is now ready for wider commercial use, so beyond the regulatory customers that we have now. With regards to data, then we have a significant amount of near real-time data, and Christopher is going to tell you very shortly about the products that we offer. And also we are actively working with a significant number of parties as to how we can utilize data and combine data sets in order to provide innovation and further analytical expertise. You can move on, please. So a significant number of customers there. I'm obviously not going to read through all those. But in terms of the breadth of customers that we actually have, it's really significant, ranging from everything from sort of energy suppliers through to innovators and actually through to water suppliers now as well. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Christopher now to talk about data.
Thank you, Michelle. So data is knowledge, and knowledge is massively important at the moment for organizations to thrive. And in today's world, we have access to a lot of data. So let's talk a little bit about what we do at EMI. Essentially, we access and integrate information to help fill the gaps in with your data sets. This is going to help you and your customers in terms of having a smoother transition from A to B, but also for long-term management and long-term growth for your business as well. There are quite a few benefits to EMI and to data insight, most of them being around customer acquisition, but you've also got things such as customer journeys and switching and other things such as invoice validation to stop with the idea of bill shock and other things that can come into the fore as well when you're dealing with your clients on a day-to-day or a monthly basis. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about the 6 off-the-shelf products that we have. Some are reports, some are APIs, but I'll give you a quick rundown on them so that you've got a bit of an idea of what we do over at EMI. So first of all, we have Quote Right. Essentially, this allows you to identify any non-half-hourly meter, the address, top line, supplier info, and most importantly, the last 12 months of consumption, including the latest dated meter reads. We then have Data Genie. This allows you to identify missing information at point of customer acquisition. This can be massively important in helping reduce the time and helping you to start invoicing your customers sooner. Moving on from that, we then have SwitchGuard. SwitchGuard was originally a report. It's now an API. By the way, Quote Right is an API. Data Genie is a report. So SwitchGuard helps you understand where your clients are in their switching journey. It can avoid potentially quite costly things such as erroneous transfers or other things that can block a switch along the way. Meter Genie is another report that we have. This allows for meter asset providers to get the most up-to-date information on any changes in their portfolio. We have Quote Business, which helps you quote, manage, and report on all of your half-hourly meters, including providing 14 months of half-hourly detailed granular data for your customers. And finally, we have Meter Reader. It is a tool that provides in-depth detail for all of the non-half-hourly meters, providing 3 years worth of consumption history and meter read history. So really, to conclude, if you see your business as an office and your staff as an engine, then Electrolink's EMI data will act more like a fuel that will help the engine working, help keep the engine working and the business moving forward. Thank you, Michelle. I'll pass it over back to you. Michelle, you're still on mute.
Sorry. The next slide just explains the objectives of today's session. So first of all, just to run through the actual voluntary code of practice, which will give you comprehensive understanding of the code components and the timings of future change. Looking at proposed changes and the impact. So looking into the future, what those changes are going to be and the impacts on your organisation. And then learning how these changes can affect your operations and sort of overall business strategy. Then with regards to the sort of next steps, we can talk about how Electrolink can help you with the sort of journey between the voluntary process and then as we turn into the code being a mandatory element. So if we move on, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an overview first of all, and a quick run through the code of practice. So the voluntary code of practice, following a significant amount of discussion with the industry, was introduced in October 23, and it was introduced into the Retail Energy Code as a non-binding Category 3 change. The code of practice is administered by the Retail Energy Company, which is the independent code body for the Retail Energy Code. The code applies to third-party intermediaries operating the non-domestic gas and electricity supply market in Great Britain. And there are 6 overarching principles. And the key thing there is that there are 33 actual practices within the voluntary code that need to be adhered to. Currently, TPIs can voluntarily self-certify that they will adhere to the principles set out in the TPI Code of Practice, and that register has now been published. We expect full codification into the REC and self-certification in Q1 24 to 25, and RECCO have indicated it will be April 24 at the earliest. I'm going to talk about the change proposal R0137, which has been raised to facilitate that change. And self-compliance testing and retention of evidence is going to be vital for all TPIs. Can we move on, please? So the key thing now is that suppliers can choose who they'd like to deal with, and they can choose on what terms, etc., and how they assure those organisations. Going forward, it is going to require the code change is going to require that non-domestic suppliers only use a TPI that adhere to the principles of the code. I'm going to talk a little bit about that going forward. Okay, so in terms of the change proposal, which is on the RECCO website, basically that change proposal, which is in the future, is going to set out that suppliers can only use TPIs who adhere to the principles set out in the code. It's going to include the development of an assurance and accreditation scheme of TPIs. It will state that suppliers can contract with a non-accredited TPI that has to satisfy itself that the TPI adheres to the Code of Practice principles and will need to evidence that. It will also talk about an enduring maintenance and publishing of a register of the third-party intermediaries. And there's a key thing here, which is that RECCO is going to develop a plan which sets out further detail, including how interested parties can engage with this process. Now, that'll be quite wide because it won't only be suppliers, TPIs, it will also be consumer bodies, etc., and those that are interested in watching what is happening in this space. Move on, please. So I'm just going to run through very quickly the actual principles, of which there are 6, and I've just sort of tried to aggregate what the key practices are in them. So the first one is transparency and accuracy, which is to enable customers to make informed purchasing decisions. And there are 8 practices, or as I would say, there are 8 compliance test areas covering the introduction of a TPI to a customer, remuneration, energy consumption, customer data, pricing, source data, and contracting. Principle 2 is all about transparent pricing and product information for consumers, and it enables effective comparison and competition amongst TPIs. There are 4 practices for compliance test areas, which cover commissions, suppliers being approached, and written communications. Principle 3, treating customers fairly, which ensures a fair treatment so as to increase customer engagement and trust. 7 practices here, which cover contracting, identity, change of tenancy, selling practices, letters of authority, and termination fees. Principle 4 is a clear route to dispute resolution and provides a clear path for addressing TPI complaints. 6 practices covering complaints procedure, logging of complaints and retention. That should say the ADR scheme, sorry, there's a typo there. The ADR scheme and signposting. Principle 5 covers off appropriate data protection arrangements, and it ensures that the TPI complies with data protection regulations and promotes trust. 4 practices there covering data protection legislation, the Information Commission Officer registration, policy and access controls. And then principle 6 is around training, governance and compliance, and it ensures that the TPI understands the code of practice requirements and compliance monitoring. 4 practices in here covering training, compliance monitoring and evidence. So a significant number of items in there. What I want to cover off now are some associated documents and also some easy wins. So the code of practice has got some examples within it contained in the annex. The first one is there is an example commission calculation and how that should be set out. That's an easy win for principle 2B. So just look at that and then amend your communication with regards to calculation, and that's a quick tick in the box. The second one, there's a minimum requirement for a standard letter of authority. And again, that's been included in there, and that would satisfy principle 3E if you adopted that letter. In the complaints procedure, another easy win, which satisfies principle 4B, is basically that you amend your complaints process to complement the existing Energy Ombudsman process, and that you replicate their complaint form in your processes. And then in Annex 3, there is an example training log, and again, another easy win for principle 6B, which is to actually just adopt that training log into your processes. Then that leaves sort of 29 other compliance test areas that you'll need to look at yourselves. We'll just move on. I'm just going to cover off an approach to readiness. So first of all, I've just run through some very easy wins. The second process is to take your existing compliance framework, assuming you have one, and map each of your compliance tests to each of the 33 practice elements within the code. And against each practice, you're likely to have a number of test scenarios to map. So I've just sort of looked at one of these and taken principle 1D, which is with regards to establishing accurate energy consumption data. Now, in my mind, I mean, it's maybe more than this, but as a minimum, there's probably 4 tests that you would need to look at. So how is consumption calculated at site where there's no previous consumption history? How is the data recorded and where is it kept? And then the second bit would be, how is the consumption calculated at a site where the billing data does exist? And again, you're going to have another test, which is, how is that data recorded and where is it stored? And where can you lift that information for evidence? So I've just given you sort of a simple example, but there are obviously a significant number of tests that you will need to undertake. And then the other thing that I've sort of pinpointed here is that you will need to determine the artifacts that are going to be tested and the evidence that you're going to need to retain from those tests. So using that example from the previous slide, you may need to identify and select the copy bills for that site. You may need to record the call for the consumption data, i.e. wherever you're getting that data from, be able to refer to that, call it back if necessary. And then you would also need to keep a copy of the calculation methodology that you've used in order to determine that consumption. So there's clearly a significant amount of effort here. Secondly, you're going to need, as with all sort of audits, to determine a sample size and actually carry out those tests. But obviously, the key there is to retain all of the test information and make sure that you are able to easily recall it. Assuming you have got a framework in place, or you need to actually formulate one, you need to look at, what are the changes that are needed to policies and process in order for you to be able to self-certify. And then step 4, finally, when you have all this information together, then I believe that you're in a good position to self-declare to the voluntary code of practice. Now, of course, you may not want to do that at this point, and you may want to wait for the mandate, whereby it must be done. But obviously, there is a period of time now for you to be able to actually get all of this sorted out so that you can make your self-declaration at some point. If we just move on, please. Thank you. I'd just like to cover off what next, and sort of what you need to do, really. So, as I said earlier, the mandated code of practice is not likely to come in until at the earliest April 2024. So there is time for you to actually familiarise yourself with all of this. But a few important documents, really. So first of all, familiarise yourself with the REC website. There is a new TPI portal which has been launched. And on there, you'll be able to find the voluntary code of practice itself. You'll be able to find the RECCO consultation response following earlier consultations and discussions that have happened. You'll be able to see the actual change request itself, and you'll also be able to track progress on that change request. You'll be able to find the self-declaration letter on there as well. And you'll also be able to see the register of those who've self-certified to date. Now, I've seen, as at this morning, there were 13. Obviously, there's a significant number of TPIs, but 13 is a really good start. Obviously, there's readiness for self-certification. So however your company is going to handle that, obviously, there's numerous different ways. I'm just suggesting one approach. Look out for the RECCO TPI communications plan as well. Now, RECCO are looking at how they can bring attention to the TPIs that have signed up so far on an ongoing basis, and then in the future when it's mandatory. So that would include, for example, Citizens Advice Bureau and how they can get that information, and other interested consumer groups, etc., etc. Okay, thank you. So just like to cover off really how we can help, and a little bit of the background and so why we're here talking today. So given our role in code governance, we have had to assure a significant number of activities. We also have to assure a significant number of TPIs through the EMI process. And when we provide you with data, then that's an ongoing assurance process. We can also develop assurance frameworks, as we have done in the past, for code bodies, ourselves, etc. We've got an extensive TPI and supplier operational and compliance knowledge. So we've built this up over a significant amount of time. For those of you that may remember, there was a few years ago a talk about a third-party intermediary code of practice. A lot of the discussions were under NDA. However, Electrolink developed a code of practice, and we developed an assurance framework for that code of practice, and that was signed off by various companies, which included sort of suppliers, TPIs, etc. Back then, I realised that didn't go anywhere for various reasons, not in Electronics control. But we have got the whole of that framework, and to be honest, it has been very, very easily adapted to the new voluntary code of practice that's come in. And our expertise is in our sort of advisory area, is performing health checks for organisations. And so from this perspective, we can perform a health check of your own assurance framework, or we could help to look at your processes and your policies as a health check process to determine, how you may need to change those to become compliant with the code of practice. Okay, so I'm just going to move on. So thank you. Now that was a pretty quick whistle-stop tour of everything. And we now, I've also got, Amran and Duncan on the call as well, who are two of our sales managers in the data team, in case there are any questions there. So I'm going to move on to questions and answers now, and see if you have any, or if there are already any questions or comments there. The first one is, what happens if we choose not to sign up to this code of practice? Well, at the moment, it is voluntary, so you can continue to operate as if, nothing has changed. However, I think Retco would really urge you to review these requirements now and as early as possible, before they introduce the mandatory code of practice next year. Okay, the next question that we've got is, we're already signed up to a code of practice provided by an energy supplier. Does this supersede that? So the answer to that is no, it doesn't supersede it at all. Retco have introduced a code of practice which demonstrates as a minimum requirement of best practice. And the energy supplier at the moment has got their own views of what a minimum expectation is. Now, the energy supplier at the moment is free to add any additional requirements to their own code of practice, or with their contractual arrangements. And clearly going forward, they will also be able to do that. But I just want to touch on something with regards to the assurance process in the future. Because if a TPI isn't signed up to this code of practice, a supplier can actually audit the TPI itself. They can keep the evidence, and they may be called on for that evidence, but they can in effect self-assure the TPI itself against this code of practice. So there are two mechanisms really. One is that the TPI signs up to the code of practice themselves, or number two, if they don't, then the supplier can actually do their own assurance of that. So sort of two ways going forward. Okay. Another one on the code of practice. How does the code of practice require us to disclose our costs of service? Is it aligned to the supplier license requirement under the micro business strategy review? So there is a slight change here, which is that under the micro business strategic review, there was a slightly different way of showing the estimated, or requirement there was to show the estimated total annual commission payment. Now, Retco believe that there's a different way that should be showed, which is basically that it doesn't require the commission to be displayed as an estimated annual total, but as a pence per hour, kilowatt uplift or equivalent. And they believe that enables the consumer to have sort of less misinterpretation issues than if they were actually going to just show the annual commission payment. So there is a fundamental difference there. Okay. Can a TPI be removed from the self-certification register? So at the moment, yes. Now, it hasn't actually been written down exactly how that process works. However, it's my understanding that, for example, if there is a complaint which is passed to the ADR scheme, and if there is a material breach against that voluntary code, so something quite significant, I believe that RECCO do have the right to remove the TPI from the code. Now, going forward, when the code of practice is actually formalised and introduced into REC, then there will be a clear outline of how an organisation can be removed from that register. Okay, I'm going to take some data questions now. I thought best to keep those together. So under our process, when someone requires data from us or an API, then we do ask for a DPIA to be completed. So that's a data privacy impact assessment, and that will assure the data transfer system user group that the TPI or the supplier or any of the party that is actually using our data or their data, that it's actually secure and it actually complies with the actual DTSA, which is the agreement which enables Electrolink to supply data. So I don't know if Duncan or Amanjit want to add anything to that.
So you pretty much explained it in great detail. So we would provide this questionnaire, and the questions include stuff like how you collect or store the data, how you delete the data, what geographies you'd be using for this, and so on. And it would take 15 working days in order to get this approval, but once you do get approval, we'll be able to pretty much provide you access to the API straight away.
Great, thank you. And I guess linked to that one, what is the consent process? Do you just want to talk through that?
Essentially, once you've been approved for the DPIA, you still need to get customer consent if you're making a call. You can do this by industry standard terms like LOAs and verbal LOAs. In terms of, we don't need you to provide us with letter of authority every single time you want to run a search, but essentially you can be audited from time to time. So you need to be able to provide a clear auditable trail, whether that be LOAs, email chain that clearly states that you had access to run the API search on behalf of the customer, but essentially it's following GDPR rules on consent.
Thanks, Duncan. And maybe I could also put this one over to you. How up to date is our data?
So essentially, it is copied data directly from the network. So as soon as data flows are flown across the network, we copy the data and then upload to the API. So it varies obviously on when the data flows are sent, but if you look at half-hourly data, for example, 90% of the MPANs in the UK tend to send data on a day+1 basis. It then takes us a day to copy that data and upload it to the APIs, and the upload finishes at around 11 PM at night. So realistically, you'd be looking at data from 3 days ago on half-hourly data, but it's the most accurate data and that you're going to get without having a direct relationship with the DC, etc.
Thanks, Duncan. I don't think there are any more questions. Just give it 1 minute. No, I don't think so. So thank you ever so much for your time, everyone, this afternoon. And we will make these slides available should you require them. But otherwise, I wish you a really good day. So thank you very much.